Shalom. So there's an uproar about the Black Cleopatra movie. But why? Because she was depicted as a black woman in the movie? I didn't see an uproar when they were depicting Caucasian people as the people of Egypt, Mitzrayim. And saying that, you have to know that Moses was also went in as as the Pharaoh's grandson. I will show you that this was not the Egyptians. This was not Moses. And I will show you in scripture as well as DNA.
Let me see how that's going to look. So check this out, y'all. This is what the Jewish people have in their hands. We know of the Bible, right? See, there's some information we just not having access to. But we know the Bible, but the Talmud is written documents from hundreds of rabbis over a couple thousands, few years that they have written in their dissecting their Torah. You see, we're at a disadvantage because when the Bible was written, it was translated and things were left out. This is why I say not everything in the Bible is true. Because how is it that these Jewish people, they have the Talmud, they have the Midrash of their scholars, supposedly, the rabbis who have written to expound on the Torah, to give either Cretan information, to bring clarity in the writings. When King James got his hands on it, and he brought forth 70 of these so-called scholars in the manuscripts, if you will, they translated and only put in what applied to them as being Christians. Not adding in those things that may have been being used or for those who were considered to be Jew. This is why words and terminologies are so important, because if you don't understand this and you're only using the Bible and we don't have access to what the original scrolls, scriptures, and the ancient writings were. But when you go to the Jewish people, they're holding on to some documents that they are going to state things different than what the Bible states, which actually is incriminating. Or also you see that the hidden truths than what they want to describe. So right here in the Talmud that you see before you, it says here off to the right. First, it says right here, Perkei de Rabbi Elazar. He is a rabbi, okay? We go over to the right. It says it's composed Talmudic Israel, Babylon, C 6030 over to C 1030 CE, before the Common Era. You find this was composed 1,000 years ago. That this Rabbi Elazar, right? It says that is a midrash that retells and expands upon the stories of Torah from the creation of the world through the story of Miriam leprosy. Miriam was the sister of Moses. So he breaks down what you see over here, these chapters, in what he will retell and expand upon the stories based upon the Torah. Now, the Bible was actually translated from the ancient writings. The Torah was one that you see today as the Bible. But King James did not see it fit for some things to be put into the Bible, being that he's an Englishman and these people were Catholics. Why do we need to put stuff that may apply to us, that we call ourselves Christians, when we're taking out of a book from the Torah? Now, the Torah, these ancient scrolls, scriptures, and ancient writings, were not from the Jewish people. It was from where they got our people. Of course, they took on of these writings that they find and developed by council of people to go ahead and develop what they would call in their Yiddish language, the Torah. Some would say it would be the Septuagint or the Tanakh, or the Tanakh, whatever. You have these different names that are called. But here it actually says over here, if you look to your right, it incorporates discussions on topics like redemption, Messiah, and calculating the ends of days, traditionally considered to have been authored by Rabbi Elazar ben Harkanas in the time period of Mishnah, the 1st and 2nd centuries. The work was likely edited in the 8th and 9th century. Edited. But we're going to get over here to Noah, because this is the topic that one needs to understand. But before we get into understanding that, we see Rabbi Elazar, It says here that he is an Agadic Midrashit. What does that mean? That means he is a non-legalistic exegesis or exegesis, which appears in the classical rabbinic literature of Judaism, particularly the Talmud and the Midrash. In general, the Agada is the compendium of rabbinic texts that incorporates folklore's historical anecdotes, moral exhortations, and on. It says it's a work of the Torah containing exegesis and retells of biblical stories. Now, this rabbi is one that was considered to be a scholar during his day, that many relied upon to use what he had in front of him to be able to break down these chapters that were in the Torah concerning those 54 chapters, whether it might have been in Genesis or Exodus. So we find that he is an important part of this breaking down back then what was him writing those facts that were at hand that we don't have access to. Now, the Talmud, what I'm going to be reading from, what is written in there, is the very thing that it says here is a central text from the rabbis' Judaism and the primary source of Jewish religious law. The term Talmud normally refers to the collections of writings named specifically the Babylonian Talmud, although there is also an earlier collection known as the Jerusalem Talmud. It may be also traditionally be called Shash. The Talmud has two components: the Mishnah, a written compendium of the oral Torah, and the Gemara, an elucidation of the Mishnah and related Talmudic writings that often ventures onto other subjects and expounds broadly on the Hebrew Bible, which these scrolls, ancient writings, and these scriptures have been found over the years that they themselves took upon to create Judaism. Midrash, mode of biblical interpretations, prominent in the Talmudic literature. So they're interpreting what you're going to find this rabbi did. Now, you all are familiar with the Bible. And in the Bible in Genesis 10, it talks about the family tree of Noah. This is the family tree. Noah, who had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. after the flood, they themselves had sons. And so this breaks down the sons, the son of Japheth, okay? Japheth had Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tabal, Mashish, and Taras. These also sons had other sons. You're going to find Gomer, who had Ashkenaz. Now, doesn't it sound familiar? Ashkenazi Jews. This is part of those people who were affiliated with the side of Japheth. Now, we're going to get into what does this rabbi, how do we know who these people are? Because we're going to get into what this rabbi says. But as it goes on, it says right here in your Bible that even Gomer and Javan had sons. And it goes on to say that, let me go on here further down, that here in 5, it says that the Japheth and his sons, these were right here, these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands. Now, if anybody knows anything about a little history, you're going to find Magog is Russia. You're going to find these are the northern plains, whether you want to say Russia and the Akistans, Bugakistans and Afghanistan. These are the northern parts of Africa, from northern parts of Africa. If you want to talk about Europe and all that, these are these people. But when you say what's interesting, that your Bible reveals who these Gentiles are. Now, hold up. It says, by these were the isles of the Gentiles, divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families and their nations. It didn't say nothing about them being Jews. This is in the Bible. But let's go on over here to see, because then it also goes on, it says Noah's other sons, which was Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Put, and Canaan. It goes on to say who Ham's sons were, and it gets on down to where it says that, and the beginning of his kingdoms was Babel, and it goes on to the names of those. It further will go on to his other son, where you're going to find out was Shem. Now we find that Shem is what we know of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the children of Israel, the 12 tribes, come from Shem. Now, let's go on over here to the Jewish people's writings over in the Talmud by their scholars, the rabbis, back in the day that I just read to you who this Eliezer was. He went and touched on this very verse in the Bible of who the sons of Noah was. And here it says, it talks about the Nimrod and Tower of Babel, but it talks about Noah, and Noah specifically. For all y'all who believes in this Bible, right? Here on the side of the Torah that they have, that you don't have access to, that we know that the Bible was written by King James, which then other Bibles came out of that writings, changing my interpretations, that King James saw it fit not to use actually Hebraic terms and terminology, but yet put it in an English dialect for them and their people to understand. But he chose not to use or bring in certain things. But here you're going to read that Noah brought his sons and his grandsons, and he was blessed with them. There are several settlements, and he gave them as an inheritance all the earth. He especially blessed Shem and his sons, making them dark, but comely. Comely means beautiful or beauty in nature, or looking, or have you. And he gave them the habitable earth. Now, we know that dark is not white. We're going to get down to find out what that is. But we find that Shem, his son, was dark. Now, we know there are many shades of black, right? We know there are many shades of black. I'll get to that. Black goes from the blackest of the black all the way to white people. It's a proven fact, please do your research, that 2 white people cannot make a black baby. But 2 black people can. But it says here, he especially blessed Shem and his sons, making them dark but comely. And he gave them the habitable earth. He blessed Ham and his sons, making them dark like the raven, and gave them as inheritance the coast of the sea. He blessed Japheth, and his sons, making them entirely white, and gave them for an inheritance the desert and its fields. These are the inheritances with which he endowed them. Now, we know Arabs live in the deserts, and as you go further north, you get whiter. We know the dark ravens, the darker skin, what we call the Africans, we knew that they were more into the coastal lines, or if you say coastal, you're going to find when you go further on the eastern plains of Africa, if this is the origin of beginning in the region of the Egypt, what we know Egypt was, and Egypt wasn't the way it was cut out back in the 1800s when it was the rush to carve up Africa. But we know it was a larger in scale, as well as Ethiopia extended all the way from the east of Africa all the way to the west of Africa. Actually, the Atlantic Ocean was called the Ethiopian Sea. But you see here the 3 sons that we saw, that Shem was dark, Ham was dark, but like a raven, and Japheth was white.
Now I'm going to stop the video right here for a moment to bring something to light. So he just mentioned that Ham was dark as a raven, which I showed a picture of what that would look like. So let me explain something to you that you might look past. So Ham had a son named Mitzri. When they went through changing names, they never really told you what Mitzrayim was. Well, today what they call Mitzrayim was a person, but it's also a land. And that Mitzrayim is what we know now as Egypt. So what this is telling us is the paintings on the walls of the ancient Egypts being black and African is true. They were all dark as a raven. They weren't white. They weren't tan. They were black as a raven. So you might say, okay, they changed Mitzrayim's name to Egypt. So guess what that means? Your pharaohs were African. You always wonder why they shot off the noses of the statues? Because they were African noses. Take that in your pipe and smoke it for a minute. So in the book of Jasher, they hid something from you that you didn't know. The fact that Moshe was the leader of the kingdom of Cush for a while. As we know from the lineage of Ham, Cush also are descendants from the children of Cham, because it's really Cham, not Ham. So for him to be the leader at that time, he had to be dark. And since he was in Pharaoh's place, which was in Mitzrayim, which we know as dark Africans, that also should tell you that he was dark.
And Kenan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Mitzrayim, that it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west that is to the sea. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward from the border of the Jordan and from the border of the sea. And Cham, his father, and Cush and Mitzrayim his brothers said unto him, You have settled in a land which is not yours, and which did not fall to us by lot. Do not do so, for if you do so, you and your sons will fall in the land and be accursed through sedition. For by sedition ye have settled, and by sedition will your children fall, and you shall be rooted out forever. Dwell not in the dwelling of Shem, for to Shem and to his sons did it come by their lot. YOVHELIYM Jubilees 10:29-31 at CEPHER. And Moshe the son of Amram was still king in the land of Cush in those days, and he prospered in his kingdom, and he conducted the government of the children of Cush in justice, in righteousness, and integrity. And all the children of Cush loved Moshe all the days that he reigned over them, and all the inhabitants of the land of Cush were greatly afraid of him. And in the 40th year of the reign of Moshe over Cush, Moshe was sitting on the royal throne while Adoniahu the queen was before him, and all the nobles were sitting around him. And Adoniahu the queen said before the king and the princes, What is this thing which you, the children of Cush, have done for this long time? Surely you know that for 40 years that this man has reigned over Cush he has not approached me, nor has he served the Elohim of the children of Cush. Now therefore hear, O ye children of Cush, and let this man no more reign over you as he is not of our flesh. YASHAR JASHER 76-1-6 at CEPHER.
This is going to be a very controversial video because of its ongoing debate. But I still don't understand why some people are still debating on this. I think there are some reasons to that, and I'll get to that in another video, but in this one, we are going to watch a short clip that will confirm what we as Africans have known for ages. Now let's watch the video.
But the CT scan has one more surprise for Alejandro. Shammai's ethnicity.
Well, they have just told me that Shammai had Nubian features, which means that their ruling family was probably Nubian, and that was unexpected.
Examining Shammai's anatomy closely, the thickness of his bones and the shape of his nasal cavity, the anthropologists think he was a black African, likely from neighboring Nubia. A huge revelation that challenges the prevailing image of the Egyptian ruling class.
We always thought the ancient Egyptian elite were Mediterranean type, and in this sense, Shammai is representing the society of the frontier, in which different ethnic groups were mixed. At the end, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. Shammai was Egyptian.
The archaeologist in the video is Alejandro Jimenez Serrano. He and his team found a tomb on the western bank of the Nile, opposite Aswan. And as you might have heard, the mummy was called Shammai. So who was Shammai? Not much is known about him, but the little that we know is that he was an ancient Egyptian official who later became a vizier towards the end of the 8th dynasty during the first intermediate period. And his time in office is somehow interpreted as a sign of extreme weakness of the central power. And as you might know, ancient Egypt was in decline during the 2 intermediate periods in its history, and Mr. Jimenez Serrano just discovered that as far back as the 8th dynasty, the ruling class had Nubian features, and he finds this unexpected. That's really telling, don't you think? Before we continue, kindly leave a like and subscribe to this channel where we talk about African history and everything concerning Africa. Thank you. This discovery is obviously significant, and some of you might try to debunk this by saying that Africa never had a civilization and that we should stop our obsession with Egypt. But all you have to do is listen to Mr. Jimenez Serrano and the evidence he is pointing out. He is clearly an expert that is telling you the obvious truth, and even he himself was disappointed in his findings. As a point of clarification, Africans are not obsessed with ancient Egypt. We just want the rest of the world to acknowledge Africa's history and give credit where credit is due. There are hundreds of African kingdoms to be explored, and ancient Egypt is just one of Africa's great past. It's not a conspiracy, but they will rather credit our achievement to aliens or label it unknown rather than give the black man its due. And when we try to dig up Africa's history, they call us Afrocentrics. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.
Is the tomb at Beni Hassan. It dates to 1700 BCE. Because no one has looked for evidence of the Exodus in this period, the tomb has never been linked to the biblical story. And yet, there is a perfectly preserved wall painting here that records an ancient migration into Egypt from the area of modern Israel. As in the Bible, the scene involves bearded Semites riding donkeys and bringing their families and flocks into Egypt. Like the biblical Israelites, they are wearing multicolored tunics. The hieroglyphic inscription on this wall calls these people the Amo, God's people. Looking in the right place, during the right time, we are the first to recognize a veritable snapshot of the migration of the biblical Israelites to Egypt. The Bible records that at the time of their arrival, one Israelite rose to the highest levels of Egyptian power. His name was Joseph, son of Yaakov, Jacob in English, and he became so powerful that he wore on his finger the seal of royal authority. Discovering Joseph's seal at Avaris would prove that the Israelites arrived here exactly when our timeline predicts. That would be like finding a needle in a 3,700-year-old archaeological haystack. Incredibly, the tiny seal was found, precisely at the archaeological layer we anticipated. In fact, Professor Manfred Bitak found no less than 9 seals worn by Joseph's court officials. Inscribed right on them is the Hebrew name Yaakov, Joseph's father.
It's very strange that we found 9 seals with the name Jacob here. It's a biblical name, by the way. The original was probably mounted on a ring worn on the finger, and this gives us a new puzzle.
Is it really a puzzle? Not if one uses our chronology. This is the only time that a Hebrew name appears on an Egyptian royal seal. It directly connects Avaris with the Bible. But Professor Bitak steers clear of biblical chronology. He's under the constant watch of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, who have made Avaris off limits to the public. Supposedly for conservation reasons, Professor Bitak has been forced to cover up his dig every single year. The area is then plowed, seeded, and cultivated by local farmers. No one would suspect that underneath these fields lies an archaeological treasure trove that proves the biblical Exodus.
And we all know the biblical story of Joseph. The fact that his brothers thought he was an actual Egyptian and not a Hebrew, Israelite. So that means he had to look like them as well. So you take your own knowledge and understanding and figure it out.
And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear you, when ye depart thence, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Sodom and Amorah in the day of judgment, than for that city. Mark 6:11 CEPHER.